Well, good morning, everyone. It is so good to be here with you. My name's Ben. I am the student pastor here at Church at the Creek, and today is week 3 of our series At the Movies, where we're finding God's truth in unexpected places, like animated films with talking emotions. And so I am excited. I'll be honest with you, though, I'm also a little bit nervous. I always get a little bit nervous before the At the Movies series, just because I'm not a big movie person. I've seen like 10 movies in my life, and 4 of them were Shrek, so I don't think that counts. But this week's message has me extra nervous, not because the movie we're using, but because of the emotions in it. We're in the middle of looking at the Inside Out movies, and if I'm being real with you, I'm not exactly what you would call an emotionally in touch person. I'm just not. Believe it or not, though, this is actually the Inside Out. The original movie is one that I have seen before. When I was 18, I was a middle school intern for a student ministry, and we took this whole group of middle schoolers to go see that movie in theaters. Now, important context to the story. I had a huge crush on the other girl who was the intern with me that summer, and so that's going to really set up a lot of this story that you need to keep that in mind. But so she comes up and she's talking to her middle schoolers that she's leading, and she's like, oh my gosh, this movie is so deep. It's just going to make everyone cry. And all these middle school girls are agreeing. They're like, yeah, it's going to be so deep and we're going to cry. And I was like, yeah, me too. I'm going to cry. Bring the tissues, folks, because I'm here for it. Now, keep in mind, this was like a point in my life where I cried like once every 2 to 3 years. So I was really setting myself up for failure here. But we sit down, the movie starts, and I'm waiting for this life-changing, tear-jerking moment at the end of the movie, and then it ends. And the credits rolled, and I didn't find it. I was so confused. I was like, did I miss it? Did I like sleep through this movie? Because I'm looking around at all of these middle schoolers and they're crying. And I was like, I didn't see anything sad about this movie. Turns out I didn't fall asleep. I just didn't get it. Like it just went right over my head. And all these middle schoolers got it and I didn't. But basically, like the way the movie ends, we talked about it in week 1 of the series, but the big idea is that sometimes happy memories can be sad too. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense because then it'd just be sad. Sad and happy are opposites, and they cannot be the same. That's how my brain worked, at least at the time. And so I was so confused by the end of this movie. But if you weren't here for it, go back, watch Isaac's message from week 1. He does a great job breaking down the difference in or the relationship of joy and sadness, and explains that in a way better way than I just did. That wasn't a good explanation, by the way. But go back, watch that. And in case you're worried about me, I do go to counseling now. So like if you're like, man, who's this guy teaching us? I am working on it. This might be a little bit of oversharing, but one time my counselor said to me, Ben, you have a very low tolerance for negative emotions. And I didn't like that. That sounded like a bit of a downer. So I said, or you could say, I have a very high tolerance for positive emotions. And she stared at me for a second, and she goes, do you see how that's exactly what I'm talking about? So yeah, emotions are not really my thing, but Inside Out 2, lucky for me and for you, the movie we're talking about today, this one, when I watched it, it hit a little bit differently. I felt this one because in Inside Out 2, we're introduced to a few new emotions, some more complex emotions as Riley gets older. And the one that takes center stage and the one that we're going to be talking about today is this: anxiety. And if we're honest, anxiety is something that almost every single one of us in the room feels. Whether we're a follower of Jesus or not, it doesn't matter. We feel it. But few of us know what to do with it. And now for some of you, just hearing the word anxiety makes your chest tighten up a little bit. Or others of you in the room, you might not be sure if you'd call it anxiety, but you know what it's like to feel constantly overwhelmed or uncertain or just not okay. It's kind of like no matter how much you try to keep it all together, something always feels off. And early on in Inside Out number 2, we see someone who feels this way as well. Riley is heading into high school. She's trying out for her high school hockey team, and then she learns that her 2 best friends, her 2 hockey mates that she's played with for years, got zoned for a different school, and they're not going to be going to the same high school as she is. And everything she knew, everything that felt safe, suddenly felt like it was slipping away. And that's when we meet this new emotion, anxiety. So let's take a look. I love that. And did you catch that? Anxiety says, I keep Riley safe from the scary things that we can't see. And simply put, our working definition for anxiety today is this. Anxiety is what we feel when we're afraid something bad might happen, even if it hasn't happened yet. It's your mind and your body trying to protect you, but sometimes it goes into overdrive and it makes it hard to think clearly or to feel at peace. And that's what makes anxiety so tricky, because it feels like it's helping. And sometimes it is, which brings us to something that we don't talk about enough. Fear and anxiety, they are so deeply connected. Even in that clip we just saw, I love Fear says, I think we're going to get along really well. They're so deeply connected, and the truth is fear and anxiety, they're not always the bad guys. In fact, they were created for a reason. Fear is what keeps you from walking too close to the edge. Anxiety is what reminds you to study for that test, to lock your front door, or to show up on time. They're not evil, they're protective. They show up to keep us safe from things that might hurt us. But here's the problem, and here's where we get in trouble. What was designed to protect us can start to control us. And when fear and anxiety stop being signals and start being steering wheels, that's when peace gets pushed out of the picture. Our emotions are great indicators, they're just terrible leaders. And that's why, if we're honest, many of us in the room, if we could get rid of one emotion, a lot of us would choose to get rid of fear or anxiety altogether, because we know what it's like for fear and anxiety to lead. And when fear leads, peace disappears. But here's the problem. None of us actually want that. Because fear and its cousin, anxiety, they're not all bad. It's what helps us learn from the past and to prepare for the future. Maybe you said something dumb in front of friends and you're like, oh, I'm never going to say that again. Like, that's a good thing. Or I showed up late to an important meeting, so next time I'm going to make sure to get there early. That's healthy and that's helpful. But where it goes wrong is when anxiety stops protecting you and it starts controlling you, when it becomes the loudest voice. And that's when we spiral. That's when we feel stuck. And the internal conversation begins to change. Here are some examples. I got hurt in that relationship, so I'm not letting anyone in like that ever again. I couldn't fix that situation, and so now I feel responsible for everything, even the things that I can't control. Or I felt anxious once, and I didn't know why, and so now I live in fear that that feeling's going to come back, and I won't be able to stop it. Without realizing it, anxiety, which was meant to protect us, can become the loudest voice and push out all of our other emotions. And here's how it looked for Riley. Anxiety bottles up all of Riley's emotions. And here's the thing about anxiety. It doesn't play favorites. It doesn't care how old you are, how strong you are, how smart you are, how spiritual you are, or how successful you are. It shows up uninvited, and it takes over everything. Whether you're a ninth grader walking into a new school, or a parent wondering how you're going to make it through the next month, or you're a leader carrying pressure that no one else would ever know about. Anxiety shows up unannounced, and often when we least expect it. And when it does, most of us do the only thing we know how to do. We fight it. We fight to make sure that we don't feel anxiety, that we don't feel those feelings. We try harder to make sure those feelings go away. We fight and we push through. We pretend that we're fine. But here's the question that I want us to wrestle with today. What if fighting anxiety is actually the very thing keeping you from finding peace? What if peace doesn't come from trying harder or fixing your anxiety, but from something else completely? And that's what we'll discover today as we look at this story from the Gospel of Mark. And Mark is one of the 4 New Testament accounts of Jesus and his life, his ministry, and his teachings. And Mark is actually based on the firsthand accounts of Peter, one of the closest friends and followers of Jesus. And this story that we're about to read, it's one of those stories that doesn't just tell us something about Jesus. It shows us something about who he is in the middle of fear and anxiety. And Jesus, he's been teaching all day down by the Sea of Galilee to a bunch of people. And at the end of the day, he decides to take his disciples across the sea by boat. In Mark chapter 4, verse 35 is where we're going to pick this up, and it says this: "That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were others also with him in the boat." Now, it's important to know this. In Jesus' day, large bodies of water weren't just dangerous, they were terrifying. To Jewish people, their view of large bodies of water were largely shaped by stories from the Old Testament. And so to them, the sea represented chaos, darkness, and uncontrollable forces. It was unpredictable, it was untamable, a place to be avoided unless they had to. A lot of times they would fish near the shore of the Sea of Galilee, but deep sea voyages were usually avoided and often feared. And the Sea of Galilee was already scary enough, but storms could hit at a moment's notice, and those storms could be very violent. And so when Jesus tells his disciples to get in the boat and go across the sea, they weren't just afraid of bad weather, they were afraid of everything that the sea represented: danger, chaos, and even death. And they were right to be afraid, because look at what happens next. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. I mean, this wasn't just a sprinkle. This was a terrifying, out-of-nowhere, life-threatening kind of storm. I love that phrase, furious squall. It just paints a picture of how chaotic this is. The disciples, they're doing everything they know to do. They're panicked. They're bailing water. They're shouting orders. They're bracing for impact. And they're probably thinking, this is why we shouldn't have come out here. Like, see, Jesus, like, we never should have put ourselves in this situation. But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about a storm on a sea. This is a picture of the storm that fear and anxiety creates inside of us. Because that's what anxiety feels like, doesn't it? Like, one minute things are calm, and then out of nowhere, your thoughts are racing, your chest is tight, your heart is pounding. You're trying to keep it together on the outside, but on the inside, it's chaos. And like the disciples, you feel like you're sinking. Like no matter how hard you try, you can't make it stop. And maybe, just like them, you've asked, Jesus, where are you? Because in the middle of your panic, in the middle of your fear and anxiety, it can feel like God is distant, silent, or even asleep. Maybe if you aren't a follower of Jesus, it's because you had a moment in your life where you needed God and it felt like he was nowhere to be found. And that's exactly what the disciples say next. It says, Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. I'm glad you're comfortable, Jesus. We've got something going on out here. I don't know if you've heard us screaming, but I'm glad you're relaxing. But Jesus, there's something going on you should know about. The disciples woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" I mean, can you hear the emotion in that? Don't you care? That's not just a question, that's a statement. You should have been here, Jesus. It's a cry for help. And that's what anxiety does. It makes us feel alone, like nobody knows what we're going through, like even God has checked out. And maybe that's your question today too. God, don't you care that I'm overwhelmed? Don't you care that I'm sinking? Don't you care that I can't seem to catch my breath? And what's so powerful is that same storm, that same kind of panic doesn't just happen out there on the water. It happens here in our hearts and in our minds. And Inside Out 2, we actually get to see this happen. There's this moment where Riley is overwhelmed, her thoughts are racing, and fear and anxiety take over. And suddenly, she's caught in a storm of her own. Check this out. That scene hits hard, doesn't it? That moment where Riley's in this furious squall of her own, because that's what anxiety can feel like. Your thoughts spiral, your breathing changes, your body shuts down, and no matter how much you try to fix it, you feel powerless in the storm. Everything in Riley was trying to stop this storm, but it couldn't. But in this story from Mark, something changes, and it changes everything. In verse 39, it says, Jesus, he got up, he rebuked the wind and the waves, and said, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Jesus doesn't panic. He doesn't match fear with fear. He speaks peace into the chaos, and the storm listens. Because the storm may be bigger than you, but it's not bigger than him. Jesus calms the storm with just a few words, and then he turns to his disciples and says something unexpected. In verse 40, he said to the disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And look at their reaction. This is my favorite part of the story. They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him?" See, the storm didn't just reveal their fear, the storm revealed their faith. It forced them to face the question, who is in this boat with me? And in that moment where fear, anxiety, and peace all collided, they saw who Jesus really was. Not just a teacher, not just a healer, but someone with authority over nature itself. And everything changed for them in that moment. They didn't get peace by avoiding the storm. They didn't get peace by pretending the storm wasn't there. They didn't even get peace by trying to control the wind and the waves on their own. They got peace when they faced the storm and discovered who was in it with them. And the same is true for you. So back to our original question. What if fighting anxiety is actually the very thing keeping you from finding peace? And the truth is, peace isn't found in fighting anxiety. It's found in facing it. Facing the fear, facing the feelings, facing the questions, and realizing that you're not alone in any of it. And maybe this sounds like a nice theory, but you're wondering, what does this actually look like? What does it really look like to stop fighting anxiety and to start facing it? Well, anxiety, it's not just a sermon topic for me. It's personal, because over the last year and a half, I've dealt with it in a way that I hadn't before. Earlier I mentioned that I see a counselor, but what I didn't share is why I started going. About a year and a half, life felt like it was spiraling out of control, and without realizing it, I began to spiral into fear and anxiety. I'd spent most of my life managing my emotions by ignoring them, by stuffing them down, but this time they didn't go away. In fact, they just got louder. And after months of trying to stay in control, I was drained. The more I fought these feelings, the more I fought anxiety, the more it seemed like it was winning. And like the disciples on the sea, I found myself wondering, Jesus, where are you? Because after all, I was doing all the right things. I was going to counseling weekly. I was having honest conversations with close friends and daily spiritual disciplines, but I still felt stuck. And then earlier this spring, something shifted. After a really rough week, I was driving to work one morning just before sunrise, and I was about to pull into the campus, the parking lot of our new campus, and I just broke down. I started crying, which for the record is not safe driving behavior, but I found myself in this moment where I was praying this question that almost felt silly because I knew the answer, but I'd never given myself permission to ask it. And this question scared me. But I remember asking, God, what if it's all true? I had been wrestling with these thoughts and feelings that I wasn't good enough. And I said, well, God, what if I'm really not good enough? Would you still love me then? And in that moment, I quit. I quit trying to be in control, and something shifted. Peace. Not because I had beaten anxiety, but not because I had fixed my anxiety, but because I finally started to face it instead of fighting it. That was the moment I felt permission to stop fighting my storm and face my storm. And that's when I turned to face it. And suddenly I realized that I wasn't alone, that the presence of the storm was not evidence to the absence of Jesus, that he was with me, that he loves me. He had been there the whole time. But that was the day I started to face my storm. And now I've got my community that helps face this with me. I've got tools to help me along the way, and I feel more empathetic to other people who deal with anxiety. But I don't share all of that so that you feel bad for me. I don't need you to come up to me after service and give me some encouragement. In fact, I would hate that because of the whole avoiding negative emotions things. But you are all so kind, so thank you. But please don't. But I share that today because I want you to know that if you're struggling with anxiety, You're not crazy. You're not alone. And you don't have to stay stuck. Like if you've ever felt like anxiety is winning, I just want you to know that there is a way forward, but it's not found in fighting or fixing your anxiety. It's found in facing it honestly and humbly and with Jesus by your side. And I believe that your story is still being written, and I want to encourage you to take a step forward today. And here are a few ways that you can start. And even if you would say, my anxiety is clinical, I need medication to help manage it, these steps still matter. Because research shows that they can bring real relief, especially when combined with the right medical support. But the first thing you can start doing today is this: to name what you're actually feeling. You can't face what you won't name. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's fear or stress or sadness or shame, but don't ignore it. Identify it, because facing your emotions starts with naming them honestly. The second thing you can do is to remind yourself of what is real, because anxiety loves to tell what-if stories. What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if everything falls apart? But peace begins when you stop rehearsing what might be and start remembering what is true, that God is with me, that I'm not alone. And this feeling, yes, it is real, but it's not the full story. You don't fight anxiety by pretending it's not there. You face it by anchoring your mind in truth. And lastly, talk to someone safe. This is why groups are one of our priorities here at Church at the Creek, because you weren't meant to carry this alone. Talk to a trusted friend or an adult or someone in your small group, or even talk to a counselor. But facing anxiety starts with being honest with God and with people who care. And when we start to do these things, to take steps, not towards fixing anxiety, but steps towards health, you can begin to find relief. You can find peace, and you can put anxiety back in its proper place. And maybe it'll look something like this. I love that visual. Anxiety playing its part, protecting but not controlling, signaling but not steering. And it all came once Riley faced her anxiety. And the same can be true for you today. And so I want to invite you all to stand, because we're going to sing one more song as we close today. And this song is simply a prayer inviting Jesus into our storms, into our anxiety, seeking him in the chaos, to keep anxiety from controlling us and experiencing the peace that Jesus offers. But before we sing, just briefly, I just want to remind you why this conversation matters, why this conversation isn't just important, it's critical. And adults in the room, if I can talk to you for just a second. If we don't face our anxiety, we will, without meaning to, pass it down to the next generation. A generation that is already known for how much they deal with anxiety. And we won't pass it down through our words, but through our reactions, through our silence, through the pressure that we carry but we never name, through the way that we pretend like we're fine even when we're falling apart. And the next generation is watching, and they are feeling everything, and they are growing up in a world that is moving faster than ever, with more pressure than ever, and less clarity about who they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be okay. And here's what's at stake. If we don't give them a better way to deal with their anxiety, the world will. And the world's way is to escape it, to numb it, to ignore it, to bury it deep down until it explodes. But what if we showed them a different way? To talk about it honestly instead of hiding it, to invite God into it instead of pushing him away. You see, this isn't about just managing your peace. This is about leading with your life. Because the way you handle your fear, your worry, your anxiety, it is shaping someone else's future. What if your breakthrough becomes their foundation? What if your willingness to face your anxiety becomes the very reason why they feel like they don't have to hide theirs? And this is why this matters, because the next generation doesn't need perfect parents, doesn't need perfect pastors, they don't need perfect leaders. They just need real people who are willing to go first. So let's sing this together.